This meeting is being recorded.
All right, welcome all. I'm Wendy O'Sullivan. I am the superintendent for the National Park Service Chesapeake office, and we're glad to have so many here. This is a regular opportunity that we've been offering from our office, that we call a Chesapeake Gateway's Network Chat. And here you have the agenda for today. We always start our sessions with an opportunity to just get to know everyone that's on board through what we call our networking triads, and we'll break out into those in just a minute. Today is a special chat where we are featuring one of our new strategic partners, the Department of Transportation's Volpe Center. So the bulk of today will be the Volpe Center introducing themselves and their capabilities and their partnership with the NPS Chesapeake Gateway's program. We'll break into small groups to have further discussions after the Volpe presentation, and then we'll learn some more about information and opportunities for Volpe consultations. So I would like to ask everyone to put yourselves on mute for right now. Rebecca is going to talk with us about what networking triads are, and then we'll bounce off out into small breakout groups to do those triads.
Thank you, Wendy. Nice to see everybody and some really familiar names. So we're taking the first about 10 minutes of this call to provide an opportunity for all of you to touch base with each other, maybe get to meet a few new people, maybe connect with some folks that you haven't seen in a little while. And we like to do this at the beginning of each of these calls just to make sure that there's an opportunity to build those connections and the relationships and the networks that make this community so special. For today's network chat, network triad, the question we've posed for you is share where you grew up and if and where you played outside as a kid. So as you pop into your triads, introduce yourself, your name, your organization, and then think about as a kid, did you play outside? Where did you play outside? And then we'll come back from those triads. You'll have about 8 minutes. So, they're short stories that you're sharing with each other. Brent's going to pop you into groups of 3. Are you all set, Brent?
Here we go.
All right.
The folks that you were broken out with, and we are going to just sort of jump right into it. If you wouldn't mind pulling up the next few slides. So for those that might be new to joining a Chesapeake Gateway's chat, I just want to start here with just to share with everyone this sort of scale and scope and importance of the Chesapeake. So when the NPS talks of the Chesapeake, we mean both the Bay and its full 41 million acre watershed. So from upstate New York all the way down through Virginia Tidewaters and everything in between. And you see here just some, big high level facts about the importance of the Chesapeake, including a fairly significant federal presence with 58 units of the National Park System, multiple wildlife refuges, national forest, national wildlife refuges, and many DoD installations across the watershed as well. Next slide. And just also ground just a bit on who the NPS Chesapeake Gateways program is. We are over 20 years have been up and running with very successful and innovative work across the watershed. We're a program, we're a community assistance program. We provide technical and financial assistance and work with partners all across the watershed. And this is just a snapshot of some of the impactful thinking and work that's been done in the office. Next slide. So the Chesapeake Gateways program is truly a network, and we are focused on places, people, stories, equity, and inclusion. And the structure of the Gateways program functions at a gateway site level. So individual existing parks and refuges, historic sites, museums, other special places that are managed largely not by the National Park Service, largely by partners. Of course, national parks are also considered gateway sites in the watershed. We also like to think and work at a landscape scale. So looking at across the landscape, what are those regions where people connect more directly and have a more cultural connection to those sub-regions. So whether that's the upper James or the lower Susquehanna. So we function and work at that scale as well. And more recently, we're starting to also think about how we can bring support at a community scale. Next slide. Recently, in the past year, we completed and issued a new 5-year strategic plan that has these 4 pillars. And we've been working to establish partnerships that help advance these 4 pillars, and are going to be doing more of these network chats to both connect our partners, connect the network, but also bring learning and technical assistance out to our network of partners. And today, next slide, we have a spotlight of a strategic partner that is a new partnership that our office has established with a sister federal agency, the U.S. Department of Transportation, and the Volpe Center. So I will end it here and just pass it on to the team from the Volpe Center, except to say that NPS Chesapeake is so proud to partner with the Department of Transportation's Volpe Center to bring strategic and collaborative work out to the network that focuses on equitable access, transportation, multimodal support for partners. So I'll hand it off to Heather and the team at Volpe.
Thank you, Wendy. Sorry, just navigating and turning on my audio. So I'm Heather Richardson. I'm with the Volpe Center. I'm a transportation planner. We are based out of Boston, Massachusetts, and I'm here today presenting with my colleagues Holly Bostrom and Anthony Jones, and I'm going to walk you through a little bit of an overview of who the Volpe Center is, and then pass it along to Holly and Anthony to give you some more detail on the different types of technical assistance that we can provide, and then end up talking about, what are your transportation needs as a gateway partner, and how the Volpe Center can engage with you through NPS Chesapeake to help start to identify those challenges and potentially address some of them. And so to start off, what is the Volpe Center? So we are a part of the Department of Transportation under the Office of the Secretary. And as part of DOT, we really follow our agency's priorities with regards to improving equity across the transportation systems and communities, making sure that the transportation system is safe, and then also taking the opportunity as we have it now to really transform the transportation system. A lot of our infrastructure is aging and needs to be replaced. And rather than put it back exactly the way it was, let's rethink and transform how we're designing the system for the future. We engage nationally as well as globally in transportation research, and we are basically a shared resource. We provide technical expertise to US DOT, our sister agencies within DOT, including Federal Transit and Federal Highway, but also Park Service, other federal land management agencies, and many external organizations as well. So we really try to be available to support across a broad range of stakeholders and partners. And so just in general, our mission is really about innovation and enhancing the transportation systems. There are a lot of complex and pressing transportation challenges, and our goal is to look at how the problems can be solved with intermodal systems and prioritizing, again, the safety, equity, innovation, and infrastructure. So that's kind of big picture who we are, but really who we are and what can we do. We are multidisciplinary. That's a really key factor in how we operate. Planners work with engineers, work with economists, work with IT and technology specialists to understand, what is feasible in terms of innovation and transportation planning and systems thinking, and what are the costs? How do we understand the benefits and costs of the different opportunities that we have? We work with our partners to hear from them what their challenges and problems are, so that we're taking the perspective of finding the solution to the problem rather than applying the solution to a problem that might or might not fit. And this is inclusive of all modes of transportation, from pedestrians in the last mile all the way up through automated vehicles serving different areas. And another unique part of Volpe is kind of the breadth and depth in which we work. We work with a lot of different agencies and organizations with a lot of different missions. So we work with agencies like the Park Service and the Fish and Wildlife Service to look at, preservation, conservation, what is the right amount of visitor use that is appropriate to help maintain that natural resource in its appropriate conditions. We also help to identify how do we improve recreational access to the different lands, dependent on what the goals of the managing agency's mission are. And then we also help to figure out, well, we want to give access to this space, and how do we support the surrounding community to those places with economic development and opportunities for them to thrive. And as Wendy mentioned, there's a lot of military installations throughout the watershed. We do work with Department of Defense, and a lot of times it is their need to connect their internal transportation systems to those that are right outside of their gates. And how do we make those systems work well together, even though there are differences in terms of security and access. But I think among the most important pieces is that we work globally as well as site level. So we really span the level and kind of the depth and to which we can talk about solutions. Like, we can help with a national policy to focus on congestion in parks, but we can also look at that specific hotspot at a site and say, this is really, it's a parking issue and the parking is backing up into the road. So what can we do to help mitigate that particular circumstance? And I think, given the varied land uses and scales that we work in, it really requires transportation planning to be specialized and understand that there is no one size fits all solution to the challenges that our partners have. And transportation is changing a lot, especially with the new bipartisan infrastructure law. There's a real focus on making things better, transforming our systems. And so, we want to have smart and effective planning that can make a difference and really take us, we're at that point where we can either have, that negative impact if we're going in a certain direction versus a positive impact. And, we're all really aware of how quickly the transportation system is changing, and our challenge is to figure out how planning can get in front of the change that gets us to that positive future. And so I don't want to take up too much time of talking about, kind of who we are, but I think what can help most is understanding the type of work we do and how we can bring it to bear to help the Gateway partners with some of the challenges that you might have related to access and mobility. And so I'm going to hand it off to Holly, my colleague, to talk through some of the technical assistance. Thanks, Holly.
So as Heather mentioned, we're going to focus on a few examples and different types of technical assistance that we have expertise in. As was mentioned previously, we are really focused on meeting our partners where they are and understanding what your challenges or opportunities might be given your local context, and then pairing the most appropriate tool or planning approach to meet your need. So these are really should be taken as kind of a sampling of different approaches, as you're thinking about some of the challenges or opportunities that your community or organization might face. Don't feel it needs to fit into one of these boxes. This is meant as inspiration. Next slide. The first area that we'll touch on are transportation studies and plans. These can be conducted across different scales, so they can be national, regional, or site specific. They typically take 9 to 12 months to complete. Often are looking at a range of transportation modes and include really significant engagement with stakeholders. So some of the examples of kind of national scale plans are the National Park Service's long-range transportation plan, and the Isle Royale National Park Transportation Study is one that's more focused on a site-specific example. So these can be really helpful in terms of large-scale planning for goals and vision, and then developing recommendations that align with that goals and vision that's set by your stakeholders. Next. We also provide technical assistance around transportation grant programs. We can provide technical review of a project related to its eligibility or readiness, develop some of the technical materials like the benefit cost analysis or maps and graphics, and then also provide technical review of a total application package. We provided technical assistance to the Zion National Park in support of an application to the nationally significant federal lands and tribal program, and they secured $33 million to begin replacing the aged shuttle bus fleet with battery electric buses. We've also provided technical assistance related to the Federal Lands Access Program, the FLAP grant program, which some of you may be familiar with. That one is specifically targeted to partners of federal land management agencies, so that's another one we have familiarity with. Next. We also have expertise related to data collection and monitoring. As you're probably aware, there's new technologies that have enabled more efficient and broad-reaching data collection and monitoring. And this type of more recent and updated data really supports evaluation of different transportation solutions. And so we help our partners by understanding their goals and evaluate different data collection approaches, and even get out into the field to deploy those data collection technologies. Some of the examples include support to the National Capital Region for the National Park Service. We developed the Mount Vernon Trail Corridor Study. You can see a map of some trail count data here on the slide. And we did analysis of trail conditions, safety concerns, users' needs, and resource management considerations. Next. And then finally, we also provide technical assistance related to emerging mobility trends and technology. Many of you have probably used or experienced EVs or different types of ride hailing, ride sharing types of systems. And these can have a really significant impact on public access and public lands. And so we help our partners really assess the resource protection, emission, safety, equity, and visitor experience implications of these technologies, and make recommendations related to managing those and potentially implementing or maybe even restricting them related to a particular public access site. We've also more recently gotten engaged in assessment of reservation systems for public access. With COVID, many parks have been experiencing unprecedented visitation levels, and reservation systems can be a way to understand or manage the capacity limits that a particular site might have. So I'm going to turn it over to Anthony now to walk through the other technical assistance areas.
Yes, thank you, Holly. As she's mentioned, my name is Anthony Jones, and I'll go ahead and discuss congestion assessments. So congestion assessments are basically our way of understanding the issues of traffic and visitations at a park or a certain site and locations. We help the National Park Service create a congestion management tool, which kind of helped derive this tool that reports that come from. Congestion assessments typically provide short-term technical transportation support through our public lands. They are meant to provide technical consultations with the transportation planners and explain a high level of congestions of issues, and then try to meet the needs and the solutions to the site-specific area. They're definitely customizable to your locations and locales as well. Next slide, please. And so on our end, we also help out with active transportation access, which consists of, as we see here, the Mississippi National River recreational trails, which looks at routes of accessible points through water connections. With this particular, with this one particular project, we looked at the kayak access and routes along the Mississippi and understanding what was the best access and egress points where people can visit and enjoy the waterfront. We also look at non-motorized access areas, such as in the capital region in DC, where we helped understand bike and pedestrian issues on creating protected bike lanes, as well as also ferry jitneys. Jitneys that allow visitors to go back and forth to the wharf, to the park that is shown here on the screen. We also, during this process, help engage stakeholders to understand their needs, to make sure it's specifically what the community wants, and have a developed base of concept and designs that can be implemented within the areas. Next slide, please. The Volpe Center also looks at public lands feasibility and analysis, trying to understand the needs assessments as well too. Through this, we evaluate existing conditions of your parks and areas to understand how people can get back and forth, either through feasibilities of shuttles, such as here at the Minuteman National Park, which is located here in Massachusetts, outside of Concord and Lincoln and areas. It basically kind of understands, as well as the stakeholder engagements, utilizing the parks as well as the local communities to know what their traffic's congestions are in their time-based areas to get to and from the parks, and how they'd be able to make this appropriate. We also develop analysis and scenarios to understand which level of access or the transit routes is going to be needed. If you need 3 to 5 buses to get to one area, and what times that is needed during peak hours or low hours, or do your peak seasons or low seasons at this time. And so we assist in that, in developing the next recommendations for the steps that, the issues that you're receiving in your locales. Next slide. And just recently, as we all have made known, we had the passing of the infrastructure law, the bill, which is very relevant to our current discussions, because it helped us allow to understand that we have $542.1 billion in surface transportation funding from 2002 to 2026. We're going to provide this slide with the extra links so that y'all be able to review it. But also, it focuses primarily on the betterment of roads and bridges, as well as investments within our public transportation system and improving our connections and routes. There's also equity and access and diverse criteria that is being stipulated through this bill as well as climate change and resiliency notes and understanding how electrification of a system is going to be brought through and alternative means of transportation, such as e-scooters, as well as autonomous vehicles, and improvement of our freight and networks as we can go through. Next slide, please. As we as Volpe are currently working with NPS Chesapeake and also the city of Annapolis in order to develop a public water access plan. This plan is based in a diverse community engagement that leads to the development of projects that are for equitable access. As part of our partnership with NPS as well as the city of Annapolis, we're assisting them to develop an inventory of basically 38 parks that are located throughout the city. Each park has different conditions, either from a dilapidation or they're at extreme, pristine shape. So we created this inventory to understand where the project's needs and where their issues are, and also how to better provide access to these parks as well to low income and minority communities. Through this, at the end of the development and review of these plans, we're going to take a strategic look at developing goals and objectives, as well as listing out the projects and prioritizing it based on what we have seen. And then towards the end, we'll have a deliverable of a front-facing ArcGIS storyboard map that will allow the public to actually go onto the website and access this information to see if they'll be able to, reach their park within a 5-minute walking distance, or it has some type of transit connection, as well as listing out the amenities as well. So in order to do this, next slide, we kind of set out a foundation to basically scan nationally over the country, looking from Boston to New Orleans, Chicago, even as far as out to Portland, Oregon, to see how we can utilize these 6 criterions here in order to ensure that the plan is equitable in our transportation access, that it also resolves climate change and resiliency issues, provides alternative energy and mobility to the citizens within Annapolis, and then also engaging strategic partners such as the NAACP or the Hispanic community associations within the area in order to gain those local stakeholders information and buy-in to ensure that that the network that the city of Annapolis is building in order to provide this access, either through kayaks or paddle shares, will be connected with the system that they currently have and providing equitable water access. And so we took all of that and put it into a national scan and created some case studies in order to bolster up the work that we're currently doing. And this is some of the work that we can also provide to anyone else such as yourself at the same time. With that, I'll pass it on to Heather for any further discussions. And next slide, Heather.
Thanks, Anthony. I think Rebecca was going to jump in here and see if there's any high-level questions. Rebecca, are you going to?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. So before we break into small groups, we just wanted to make sure if folks had any clarifying questions or things you wanted to go back into the slides to talk about, that we took that opportunity here now. No one popped any questions specifically into the chat as we were going, but if you have some, you can raise your hand or pop them in the chat now, and we'll make sure to capture those before we move ahead. It looks like Johnny Shockley, your hand is raised. Why don't you unmute yourself?
Hey, Rebecca, thank you. My question is, in Dorchester County, we have a new, relatively new interest in marathons and Ironman marathons, which requires biking of thousands of people around the county several times a year. Some places in the county, roads are narrow and have no bike lanes, and really needs to be upgraded. Would this program bring resources to a community such as this to facilitate those needs? Thank you.
Anthony Holly, do you want me to take this one?
I was about to say, you can take it and I can help out.
All right. So when it comes to, looking at the need for bike lanes to accommodate some special events, I think the first start would be to understand, are they just special events that you want this bike infrastructure, or is it kind of a year-round situation? And it's really starts with the dialogue with us, and then working with your local departments of transportation with us at the table to kind of facilitate conversations about, what the needs and the goals are versus what might be the physical limitations, and how to really come to, an understanding of what can be done and how quickly and when, and also really understanding, I think, that the costs of both implementation and of maintenance, and how to fund those moving forward. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
So there's a question in the chat that I think is specific, but also kind of has is this a role you can play? So Brittany Hall says, we've been working with a high school student who's doing an action project in her community. She wants to work with the local school system in Loudoun County to install electric chargers. Is this something you could help to advise on? So I think specifically, is that something you could help to advise on? And working with high school students, is that in an advisory capacity, is that a role you play?
I don't want to do all the talking. So Anthony or Holly,
I'm happy to jump in here.
All right,
so
perfect.
We do have expertise related to electric vehicles and charging, establishing charging networks. So that's certainly a subject area that we have a lot of expertise on. And we also have experience working with typically college level students in terms of student projects, but that definitely is an area we have worked before. And then I think just broadly, this kind of technical advising type role is certainly something that could come through this technical assistance opportunity to, review an approach or review a proposal. Those types of technical reviews is something that we envision providing through this partnership.
I might add one thing, Holly, and that is that we've helped develop a lot of guidance material related to different topics. And so it might be that we have an initial meeting and identify some different resources to start off with to get, everybody on the same page, and then move forward from there. Because there's a lot of great work that a lot of different organizations have done, that we want to share.
Thank you. Let's see. Vince, you have your hand raised.
Yes, I found it very interesting. I know I'm here in the Annapolis area, and when the one slide came up about a transportation plan in Annapolis, I don't know if it went as far out as Sandy Point, on Route 50 before you go over the Bay Bridge from the Western Shore. But I noticed within the last couple of years, on the weekend by 8:00 a.m., it says park closed. No more parking spaces, no more picnic groves, or just capacity limits. And again, on a major thoroughfare, 301 South Route 50. And so just from a public access standpoint, I know in some of the parks here, people are lining up 4:00 in the morning because some of the facilities just have capacity issues, parking spaces, fishing, picnic groves, and so forth. So are those also the kinds of issues that have a transportation feature to them?
So I can take this one. Events, yes, they definitely have a transportation component to it. We actually, with the congestion assessments, understand particularly the volumes at what time, all the traffic and visitations are coming into that park along that route. And then also we can also assess the number of parking spaces that are needed and projected out into the future based on how many people are projected to come along that time, and propose alternative ways of getting to that location, either through ferries or shuttles, also improving more parking structures and things of that nature. So yes, and I think Sandy Point is on our radar, but we have to talk a little bit more with Wendy about that. So.
And I guess my follow-up is that I know I talked to Wendy a lot where, the living shorelines have been a crave, like the hula hoop and other trending things that come through this mid-Atlantic region. And what I've found from an equity standpoint, many times the living shorelines limit access to limited resource people, minorities, and others, where I understand is helping the turtles get in and out, but many times they become a psychological barrier to people. And so again, I'm just looking for innovative strategies that you can do your living shorelines, but also provide access for people, and particularly people who may not have their own means to get on the waterways.
That's a comment that I think leads into this question that's in the chat that is about understanding access. So Justin Doyle in the chat says, in Virginia, there's a desire to better understand where daily access to the outdoors, parks, green spaces, blue spaces is good and where it is poor. And has the Volpe Center ever conducted a statewide study of this nature? I think getting a better understanding of some of the challenges that Vince was just articulating.
So we want to jump on that, Heather, just a little bit, and I can kind of back it up.
Yep. So specifically statewide, our closest experience, I would say, is between the support for the Park Service and also with the Forest Service. So between those two federal agencies, they have a lot of public lands, and the Colorado Department of Transportation has really engaged to do some integrated planning and thinking about access. And it's interesting because a lot of times the state DOT thinks that
some things we have to have, like, again, because it's federal funding, like we've got to.
I wasn't sure if that was part of the question.
I don't think so. You should be good, Heather.
Okay. They think of traffic in terms of commuter traffic, at the peak hours of the weekdays, and transportation or recreational traffic is weekends at different times of day. I think it was Vince who was saying that it was full by 8 a.m. And people are lining up at 4 a.m. And so we can definitely do a scan and try to understand, where the demands are when. I think that the key to doing any type of transportation planning at this level, and I mean, really at all levels, is having the right stakeholders at the table. So we don't only want to talk to a state level department, we want to engage with the regional and the local people to get a full picture. And so I'm not sure 100% if that answers your question, but it's definitely, within our capability. And what we like to do is, I think I keep saying this, but sit down with the partners and really understand what the questions are and what the goals are, and how do we kind of plot a path to get there together.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think this is a good start. And what we want to do now is break into about 3 small groups where we'll be able to go through a handful of questions that our spotlight partners, wow, that was hard to say, from Volpe have identified to talk a little bit more specifically about what's happening in your community, and start the conversations of what type of support they might be able to provide. So Brent's going to break us into 3 groups. We'll spend a good chunk of time in these small groups, and then we'll come back together and close it out, share a little bit about what we talked about, and really tie this together and how we work with Volpe. How do we ask for that sort of support and share what it is that we're looking to do. So Brent, are you ready to pop us in?
Okay, here we go. Yep.
Here are the questions.
So
Sorry if we yanked you out mid-sentence. I heard someone say.
You sure did. You sure did.
People did hear one more car is going to ruin the neighborhood. You heard that?
So Vince and Heather have a conversation to finish.
We do. We do.
Yes. Thank you all. Before we kind of talk about next steps, I'd love to hear any interesting partnerships or ideas for collaboration or needs that came out of the small group discussions. You can come off mute and share, or pop them in the chat. I think we also had Volpe representatives in each group, Holly and Anthony. So anything interesting that you heard, or things that just sparked with you, resonated with you?
So I guess I'll jump ahead. So during our conversation, I definitely seen a common theme of water trails and connections, getting that access through. And so, understanding a multi-regional, even down to a local, site specific, that's something that everyone from Baltimore to Cambridge, and out throughout the Chesapeake, even out to the Eastern Shore, are looking forward to doing. So we can help out with that. The scenic byways, in order to understand like the safety improvements, making sure that the travelers along that road have the best view sheds, and then to be able to travel safely along those. Volpe has that ability to assist technically and then advise upon as well. And then with the active transportation of connecting bikes and rail trails, or even just implementing different alternative modes of transportation, we have that synergy to do. And so definitely looking forward to working with all those that I've talked to. Me and Matt have already became best of friends already. So I'm looking forward to working with them. But if there's anything else that Holly seen out of her group, we'd definitely love to hear.
Great. A lot of similar themes and topics came up in our discussion as well. I think one thing that kind of cut across a lot of them was the connection to the local community, and just the importance of the understanding the local context and the needs or values of the local community, and that those local contexts across our group were really strikingly different. And so that's one thing that would be important in a lot of the potential projects or consultation.
And then just to kind of piggyback that off, there was another thing about messaging, getting the right messaging and educating the public on the project as well as just transportation as a whole. I know with Volpe, we have great communication expertise that allows us to reach out to the community and stakeholders in order to have that connection to get them to sit down and understand what the project actually is and to push it forward and make sure that everybody along the way understands that, hey, everyone knows what scenic byways are or what, you know, good wayfinding is, and educate the public to make sure that they understand that they can actually access these areas. And so, you know, those are good things to do.
Thank you both for sharing. Anyone else have any kind of ahas, interesting partnerships, connections that you've made in the small group? It takes a while to scroll through all of the pictures to see who looks like they might want to be talking. Well, Heather, I might turn it back to you to talk about what happens now. What are those next steps? How can people reach out to you?
Yeah. Again, you know, Wendy is graciously wanting to connect the Volpe Center staff with the Gateway partners. And we're kind of referring to it as a consultation. So if the people who were with me in my breakout session kept hearing me like, well, I want to hear from you and we need to have a conversation. And so what we, the next step would be to go to the link in the chat that I believe Rebecca's putting in, or Brent, if they haven't already. And it's just going to ask a few different questions more about, you know, what is your organization? Describe your challenge for us, you know, kind of where in the process do you think you are? And then what will happen is these will be compiled by Park Service Chesapeake office, and we're not sure how many we're going to get. You can flood us, and then, you know, that'll be fantastic. And we'll have like a lot of opportunity to see where there's overlap. But then from there, we'll go through and, you know, basically identify the timing of when we could do a consultation with each requested, and then go forward with getting them scheduled and, you know, just going down the path of kind of scoping out what the problem is, identifying the best approach to, you know, addressing the problem, and then how do we move it forward related to, depending on what the solution is, implementation. And then that's where, you know, the Park Service and other partners come back in and work together to do the implementation, I would say. And Wendy, if I'm over speaking, feel free to jump in and say, well, we're not actually.
No, you got it right. This is an opportunity to bring technical support out to our network of partners for the Chesapeake. And so how it functions is there is an, between the two organizations, National Park Service Chesapeake Office and the Volpe Center, we have an interagency agreement that the NPS Chesapeake funds. So there is a certain amount of time that is available for the experts from Volpe to support Chesapeake Gateway's partners and projects. And so as you fill in the form and we go through and see what comes in, we'll be able to then collectively identify within our office and with the Volpe partners the projects to move forward. And as Heather was saying, there might be opportunities where we consolidate. You know, if there are multiple projects that are similar and could be a group consultation, there might be very specific site-based projects. And we do expect that there may be opportunities that come in that are at a community scale that are more similar to what we're doing right now, sort of in a pilot sense with Annapolis. So the opportunity is here to share what your needs are and your opportunities are. And then we're going to be finding a way to sort of slot in those consultations, those support pieces and potentially more holistic projects with the Volpe team arcing across this coming year?
And so in terms of filling out that form, we're asking that folks fill it out by August 31st. So that will give you some time to go back to your organization, kind of think about it a little bit. Also an opportunity to share it a little broader across your networks as well. So folks that we might not have on our radar, but that this opportunity would really fit well with what they do. We're recording this session and we'll have this as a tool for folks that want to learn more about Volpe and how the resources and support of Volpe might relate to their work. But if for some reason you don't, that August 31st timeline causes a challenge for you, please just reach out to us, to Wendy. We have some of the Volpe contact information on the next slide, just to, if you're working by a different timeline, to let us know. The hope is that by having everything by August 31st, we can really do some planning for the next 30 days or for the next fiscal year. And then we'll hopefully be getting back to folks within 30 days of the submission in terms of next steps.
Rebecca, I think we also mentioned in a prep call that if someone has, a deadline that they're up against, to maybe flag it in a way so that we know, like, hey, I have to have comments back on this proposal by September 15th. And so, potentially wanting to talk to us nearer term. Is there a way to flag it if there's an upcoming deadline they have to face?
There's in the form, there's additional notes. So I think if you put in the additional notes, as long as we're tracking it, we'll hopefully catch that.
Thank you.
Not a bad idea to put it in the additional notes and send an email to maybe Wendy or Heather saying, I submitted it, but it needs attention. We have time for maybe like one question if there's something that folks aren't sure about in terms of the form, but we'll make sure to send it out afterwards as well. So you have that. I'm not seeing any hands, so I think we might be good. Wendy, I might turn it back to you.
Yeah, I just want to thank our partners at Volpe, Heather, Holly, and Anthony. It's just been a pleasure working with this team. There's so much expertise just in the three that are with us. But like Heather showed, there's this bench of expertise that Volpe is also brings to this partnership. I also want to note that the team from NPS Chesapeake that's really been engaged in this is Bob Campbell, Eddie Gonzalez, with our work here, starting with Annapolis, with the Equitable Public Water Access Plan in Annapolis. I want to say a thank you to Brittany and Britt and Devin and the team that has helped really do some of the site assessments, Colleen and Chris, and the ability to bring more support out to our Chesapeake Gateway network partners is really what this is. It's showing that we're looking for ways to understand what your needs are, to bring expertise and support out to the network, and keep an eye out for more of these chats. We're looking to hold some sessions coming up to share and listen about the needs out there as we're planning to stand up a new grants program under NPS Chesapeake Gateways. And we also want to do more of these strategic partner spotlights. We have a half a dozen or more partnerships that we've stood up in the past 2 years that really are intended to be supporting network-wide as well as some focus areas. And we'll be doing more of these sorts of spotlight chats. But that's it for me. So just thank you all who attended, and we'll have this recording and share that around the broader Chesapeake network of partners.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, everybody. Thank you,
Thanks,
Heather,
all.
Holly, and Anthony. Have a good rest of your Tuesday.